Okay, so good afternoon, everyone. For our lesson for today, we are going to tackle our lesson 5 in purposive communication, which is all about local and global communication in multicultural setting. So for our learning objectives, these are the following that you'll be able to know and to have. For number one, determine culturally appropriate terms, expressions, and images, sensitivity to gender, race, class, etc. Number two, adopt cultural awareness and sensitivity and the communication of ideas. So let us first define what do we mean by intercultural communication. So when we say intercultural communication, it is a process of sending and receiving messages between people whose cultural background could lead them to interpret verbal and nonverbal signs differently. So from the word itself, intercultural, that means between or among cultures. So it is a communication which occurs with people having different backgrounds. So let's have an example. So for example, in the Philippines, the Filipino, of course, are believing in our own cultures. We have our own cultures, we have our own traditions, principles, standards, and the likes. On the other hand, in Thailand, the Thai people also have their own set of beliefs, standards, traditions, customs, cultures. And when these two people having different cultural background communicate with each other, we call that now as the intercultural communication. Another example of intercultural communication. So, for example, again here in the Philippines, most of the Filipinos here in the Philippines are Christians who are believing in Christ, believing in God. Now, for some other cultures, uh, many are also Muslims. So when we say Muslims, these are the people who are believing in Allah. No, they are having their own traditions. They're having their own beliefs, no, their own customs. And when these Christian people and these Muslim people talk with each other, as we can see, we call that as the intercultural communication. So for you to easily understand, for you to easily remember, when you say intercultural communication, it is a communication which occurs or which happen between people having different cultural background. So that is intercultural communication. Now, we are going to talk about the opportunities and challenges of intercultural communication. And in here, we are going to focus on a diverse workforce. So before we proceed to these opportunities and the challenges of intercultural communication, let us first define what do we mean by workforce. So when we say workforce or a diverse workforce, it simply means a company which has built a workforce that includes many different types of people. So it can mean people of different ethnicities, for example, different sex orientation or sexual orientation, different socioeconomic status, ages, genders, religions, and other ways in which human innately differ. So that is what you meant by diverse workforce or a workforce. Now, we are going to talk about the advantages of a diverse workforce. What are the advantages or the edges of having a workforce which consists of different people? So first off, a broader range of views and ideas. So of course, in a workforce, if there are people who came from different cultures, so for example, I am a Filipino. No, I was raised here in the Philippines, and I know the traditions and the customs here in the Philippines. And my workmate came from, for example, America. This is just an example, anyway. So, for example, here in the Philippines, and then our work is about writing an essay about same-sex marriage. So for example, that is our test. Now, having different cultural background can actually lead to different views. For example, here in the Philippines, since we are not actually open with those topics, so therefore perhaps my view will be kind of negative when it comes to that, because our tradition is not agreeing to what is being talked about. Now, for America, for example, since they are open-minded about this, therefore they or my workmate can have a different view or a different opinion regarding the topic. So therefore, as you can see, there will be a broader range or view of idea that we are going to talk about. And number two, a better understanding of diverse, fragmented markets. So when we're talking about this, actually we're talking about the marketplace. So say for example, here in the Philippines, what are the things which are necessary to us? So of course, we have something which are necessary to us, and on the other hand, for other cultures, there are also products in the marketplace which are necessary for them, which are not necessary for us. So as we can see, since the students or the people are having different cultural background, therefore we will be having a better understanding of different markets as well. And the number three, a broader pool of talent from which to recruit. So of course, since we came from different cultures, different cultural backgrounds, therefore, there are things which I learned and there are things that the other people learn. So for example, here in the Philippines, it's easy for us to sing, to dance, or to act, because we were trained that way. But for some, or for the people in other countries, they are not trained the way that we are trained. So therefore, we have the ability that they do not have, and they have the ability that we do not have. So as we can see in a workplace where there are different people, we can have a broader pool of talent from which to recruit. So those are just some of the advantages of having different people in a workplace. Okay? Now, since we have discussed about the advantages or the edges of having different people in a particular workplace, let us now talk about the challenges of the diverse workforce. What are the challenges that are encountered by these people who are working in a particular company? And they are having different people in there. Okay, so culture influences everything about communication. So what are the challenges that they are encountering? So first one is the language. So say for example, I am from the Philippines, and my language is Filipino, and my first language actually is Filipino, and my second language is English. So as you can see, I am quite good when it comes to speaking in English and speaking in Filipino, because that's my first language. Now, for example, my workmate is from Thailand. Again, this is just an example. From Thailand. And my workmate is not that used in speaking that language that I know. For example, the English language. She's not that familiar, or she's not that knowledgeable when it comes to speaking in English. So therefore, if the only language that she knows is Thai, therefore there will be a language barrier. And because of that, we will be encountering some challenges in our workplace. So that is one of the examples of challenges that workplace are actually encountering right now, language barrier. The next one is nonverbal signs. So if you're going to, or if you're aspiring to travel around the world, or you wanted to actually go in different countries, so you should really know the nonverbal signs of different persons in different cultures, because there are some nonverbal signs, nonverbal gestures, which are kind of offending for some, but for us it's okay, or it's considered, or there are times that it's appropriate for us. Okay, so I'll be giving some examples of nonverbal signs, which are kind of offending for some people, but for some people, that's good. So for example, the taking out of tongue. For us, it's kind of mocking when you say bleh, or you take out your tongue. But then in some other countries, like Polynesia, it's an example of greeting for them. So when you stick out your tongue, that means that you want to greet that person. But then for us here in the Philippines, or some countries in Asia or in America, when you stick out your tongue, that means that you're trying to mocking them, or you're trying to offend them, or to bully them, and something like that. So you should really know the nonverbal signs of the country that you're going to go to. Okay. For number 3 is the word meaning. So later on, I'll be showing you some examples of the word meanings, which are really different if you actually learn about the language of different countries. So actually, the meaning of the words are different from one another, even though the word is just the same. So later on, I'll be providing some examples for challenges when it comes to word meaning. And then number 4 is time and space issues. So for time and space issues, of course, since we are in different cultures, there are times that we're kind of sensitive of time, but then for some other cultures, time is not a big deal for them. So for example, here in abroad or in America, for example, the people there are quite sensitive when it comes to time. So when they say 7 o'clock, they need to accomplish that thing 6:30. No, but here in the Philippines, what do we know? So some of us are very particular and know very well what do we mean by Filipino time. So when we say Filipino time, it's kind of late. So we actually start or we actually submit our accomplishments or our works late because we believe in Filipino time. No? So if you're going abroad or if you're wanted to travel around the world, you should actually be mindful of their time issues. Another is the space issues. So when we say space issues, we have discussed this in our previous discussion about proxemics. So when we say proxemics, it's how distant or how close you are with the person that you are talking to. So for you should actually know the space that you're going to give to a person that you're talking to. So for example, you're very close with that person. How distant can you give to that person? Or for example, you are talking to a larger audience. How distant you should be with those people. Okay. And the next one of the challenges also of having a diverse workforce is the rules of human relationship. So say, for example, I believe in, my culture believes that when you have a workmate, you should really be polite with that workmate. You should always talk to that workmate. But then your workmate has his own idea of how to work. So, for example, he believes that if you are working, you should not talk. No, so as we can see, there are lots of beliefs. There are lots of standards when we are talking about the rules of human relationship. Okay, so those are just some of the challenges of having a diverse workforce, having different people in a workplace. Okay, so I'll be providing some example of word meanings which really differs from country to country. So first one is the word first floor. So when you are using the American English, when you say first floor, it means that you are in the ground floor. Nasa unahan kayo ng building. Nasa unahang floor kayo ng building. But when you are using British English, when you say first floor, it actually means the second floor in our language. Why? Because they believe that there should really be a ground floor because before the first floor. So when you are using British English, when you say first floor, it means the second floor for us, which is I have there the figure so that it will be easier for you to digest. So as you can see here in American English, the first floor is in the ground, but then in British English, the first floor is actually in the second floor. No? So those are just some examples of the word meanings that differ from country to country. Okay, next one is the word pitch. So as we all know, when you say the word pitch, that typically that is a fruit that we eat, right? But then when you are going to say peach in Turkey, please be mindful when you go to Turkey because perhaps you may offend somebody when you are asking for a peach, because in Turkey, when you say peach, that means an illegitimate child. So you should really be careful and you should really be mindful of the words that they are using. And then the third example of the words which are actually the same but having different meaning is the word kiss. So in English, when we say kiss, we notice already this is when the lips touch each other, right? That is kiss. But then when you go to Sweden, when you say the word kiss, it means urine. So kapag sinabi mo sa Sweden yung salitang kiss, it means ihe. No? So you should really be mindful of those words. Okay, so now let's talk about the culture and how culture is learned. But before that, let us know what do we mean by culture. So when we say culture, it is a shared system of symbols, beliefs, attitudes, values, expectations, and behavior norms. Okay, so when you say culture, it's not just how you dress, which makes the culture a culture. Okay, now how do we learn a culture? So you learn a culture in a direct manner or in an indirect manner. So what do we mean by directly learning a culture? So when we say direct learning of culture, it means that you are being instructed. So say for example, how did you learn the culture of pagmamano? Is that being instructed to you when you were a child? Are you told to do that thing? Tinanong ka ba or sinabi ba sa iyo na kailangan magmano ka? If you are asked or if you are instructed to do that, therefore you learn the culture directly. Okay? On the other hand, we also learn the culture indirectly. How? So kapag sinabi naman natin na indirectly, it is when you learn a culture by observing others. So in here, you are not actually being instructed, but then you just learn the culture because you saw it. So say for example, you are not instructed, wala naman nagsabi sa'yo or wala naman nag-utos sa'yo na magmano ka. It's just that nakita mo siya sa paligid mo, kaya ginawa mo na rin. Okay? So that is the second way on how you learn the culture in an indirect manner. Again, the thin line between the direct learning of culture and indirect learning of culture is that for direct learning, it is when you are being instructed, and for indirect learning, it is when you observe it from others. Okay, so that is the two ways, or those are the two ways on how you learn culture.